The Black Death, 14th century. We begin in the mid-14th century, when a mysterious and terrifying plague swept across Europe, eventually earning the name the Black Death. In some regions, it wiped out half the population within just a few years, sparking fear, chaos, and societal transformation. Caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, often spread via fleas on rats. Originated in Central or East Asia and traveled along trade routes to the Middle East and Europe. Cities were hit hardest, with death tolls climbing rapidly as infection spread. An estimated 25 to 50 million deaths in Europe alone, about 30 to 60% of the population. Severe labor shortages led to social mobility for surviving peasants. Feudalism began to wane. Heightened xenophobia and scapegoating of minority groups, including Jewish communities. The Atlantic slave trade, 16th to 19th centuries. The Atlantic slave trade. This forced migration and enslavement of millions of Africans drastically reshaped demographics and societies across multiple continents. European traders collaborated with local African rulers to capture and transport enslaved people across the Atlantic. The Middle Passage was the harrowing sea journey, marked by horrific conditions on slave ships. Enslaved Africans were sold primarily in the Americas to work on plantations producing sugar, cotton, tobacco, and other commodities. Estimated 12 to 15 million Africans forcibly transported. Countless more died en route or in raids. Profound demographic, cultural, and economic shifts in Africa and the Americas. The immense wealth generated fueled Europe's industrial and colonial expansions. The Great Irish Famine, 1845 to 1849. Now we travel to mid-19th century Ireland, where an agricultural disaster, coupled with political mismanagement, led to mass starvation and migration. A potato blight devastated the staple crop on which much of the Irish population depended. British government responses were widely criticised as insufficient, exacerbating the crisis. Starvation, disease, and forced evictions plagued the rural poor. At least 1 million died of starvation and related diseases. Another million or more emigrated, many to the United States, Britain, and Canada. Ireland's population fell dramatically and has never fully returned to pre-famine levels in some areas. The Holocaust, 1933 to 1945. Perhaps the most infamous genocide of the modern era, the Holocaust was orchestrated by Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler's regime, targeting Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and other groups deemed undesirable. Systematic persecution began with discriminatory laws escalating to forced ghettos and concentration camps. The final solution aimed to exterminate the Jewish population of Europe in death camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Approximately 6 million Jews were murdered, alongside millions of Poles, Soviet POWs, Romani, disabled people, and political dissidents. Liberation of camps by Allied forces revealed the scale of atrocities. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted top Nazi leaders for war crimes and crimes against humanity, sparked global discussions on human rights, leading to the formation of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Great Chinese Famine, 1959 to 1961. This famine, one of the deadliest in human history, is often attributed to policy failures under Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward in China. The Great Leap Forward forced rapid industrialization and collectivized farming. Unrealistic production quotas and the falsification of grain output data misled officials. Natural disasters compounded the crisis, but the primary issue was systemic policy failure. Estimates of deaths range widely, from 15 to 45 million due to starvation and related causes. Rural populations bore the brunt of the disaster as resources were funneled to urban centers or hidden to meet quotas. Widespread fear and distrust in government policies set in, eventually influencing later reforms. The RMS Titanic sinking, 1912. Touted as unsinkable, the Titanic's maiden voyage ended in a catastrophic disaster when the luxury liner struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic. The ship, carrying over 2,200 passengers and crew, collided with an iceberg on April 14, 1912. Insufficient lifeboats, poorly executed evacuation, and the swift influx of icy water led to over 1,500 deaths. Many high-profile passengers were aboard, drawing global attention to the tragedy. Widespread public shock as the Titanic was considered a marvel of modern engineering. Investigations led to new international maritime regulations, including mandatory lifeboat standards and improved radio communications. The sinking became an enduring symbol of human hubris versus nature's unpredictability. The Texas City disaster, 1947. In April 1947, the port of Texas City, Texas, became the site of one of the largest industrial accidents in U.S. history when a cargo ship carrying ammonium nitrate exploded. The French-registered SS Grand Camp, loaded with ammonium nitrate fertilizer, caught fire. Attempts to extinguish the blaze failed. A massive explosion rocked the port, triggering secondary blasts in refineries and other ships. Fires spread throughout the docks and nearby industrial facilities, causing widespread destruction. At least 500 to 600 people died, with thousands more injured. Entire city blocks were razed. One of the first class action lawsuits against the US government occurred, though victims struggled for compensation. Served as a sobering lesson in hazardous materials handling and industrial safety. The Holodomor, 1932 to 1933. The Holodomor was a man-made famine in Soviet Ukraine, orchestrated through policies under Joseph Stalin's regime. Forced collectivization of agriculture and steep grain quotas led to widespread crop seizures. The Soviet government restricted population movement, preventing starving peasants from seeking food elsewhere. Millions perished from starvation over a brief span of time. Estimated fatalities range from 3 to 7 million, though exact numbers remain contested. Trauma deeply scarred Ukrainian society. Entire villages were decimated. Soviet authorities denied or downplayed the famine for decades. Rwandan genocide, 1994. In just 100 days, one of the swiftest genocides in modern history unfolded in Rwanda, targeting the Tutsi minority and moderate Hutus. Sparked by years of ethnic tensions, culminating when President Juvenal Habyarimana's plane was shot down. Hutu extremists launched systematic massacres against Tutsis. Neighbors turned on neighbors, incited by radio propaganda. The world largely stood by, with minimal international intervention until the death toll was already staggering. Up to 1 million people murdered, primarily Tutsis.